Everyone draws as a kid, whether that be the cool S or a single I in the side of our math homework, but then we stop. Why? Well, why would you want to learn how to draw? Seriously. It's confusing, it takes forever, every online tutorial tells you something that's exactly the opposite from the last one. Why even bother? Just trace over a photo. Or we could just skip all of this hard work and AI generate exactly what we have in our mind. You can look up how to draw and find a million tutorials online, but I've never seen anyone take up the case of why you should draw. And I'd like to take that up today because I feel like we're closer than ever to losing touch with one of art's most important skills. What else is so innate to the human experience like art that becomes so quickly detached from ourselves as we get older? Is art just for kids? I don't think so. That desire never goes away. Even if we lose touch with drawing, the desire just changes form. If you look online, you'll find tons of posts with people begging for old art to return, saying that we've lost something, and they're right. They just don't know what it is that they're right about. They're actually terribly confused, because this is a digital painting by someone who is very much still alive. His name is Huaishen Jie, and that's a trend I notice a lot with these videos. Most of them are contemporary artists who are painting right now. This was painted in 2018. But people obviously feel very strongly about something, and I think that's worth listening to. To be honest, in the past, I've held many of the same feelings that TikTok expresses, because I've been on this same journey too, but I want to show you guys something here. This is my sketchbook from when I took a drawing class and I had to draw the figure from life for the first time, and no, I wasn't a child, this was a college class. I was 19 years old, and I sucked at drawing, but this is one of my figures from about 4 years later. And this is a painting that I did about 2 weeks ago. It's been about 6 years total now. But when I was at the level of that very first sketch, I did what anyone else would do. I went online and I watched every video I could. But despite that, I actually didn't really make a lot of progress for the first 2 years. So I get it. It's hard out there. Guided by some not so great tutorials, it's easy to lose track of what the whole point of drawing is and get sucked into mindless grinding or the hopeless feeling that you can never be as good as the masters were. I want to present you guys with an idea that took me 2 years to even start to understand. But it was a huge turning point for me, and I never looked back after realizing that drawing is just seeing. And inherent within that word, seeing, is a search for understanding. If drawing is seeing, then drawing is our own way of making meaning of the world. So does that mean that drawing is just trying to recreate a photo as accurately as possible? If drawing is seeing, then doesn't that mean that photorealism is the goal? Well, I don't know. Let's get the people's opinion on it, because this is a sentiment that I see time and time again. Realism takes talent, but it is also mad boring. I'm a realism artist, and I feel this towards my own art. I'm like, yeah, it's technically impressive, but where is the flavor? I am just not creative, lol. It never feels like art. There is no emotion or meaning behind a hyper-realistic drawing. Well, that's what the people think. And I'm actually gonna take a stance on this that might surprise you. I agree. Realism is boring. It's very boring to take a photo of Walter White dripping in honey with lime lips or whatever and AI it, or trace it onto paper and then meticulously copy the lights and darks over hours and hours, filling in each pore on the skin to reproduce a perfect copy or hyper-real copy. But that's the problem. Earlier, we were talking about this type of realism. And contrary to popular belief, the type of realism in art in the 19th century wasn't just about creating a photographic copy of the model. If that's what you believe, then of course there is no reason to learn how to draw anymore, because you can just take a photo of something instead. But when you look at photos of models and painters from this period, you'll see that there's actually an incredible amount of interpretation, because their goal wasn't just to express the model, but who they were inside. What was their personality? What was their status? When Menzel painted the iron rolling mill, he first penciled over 100 preliminary studies for the painting. He spent years studying the individual movements of the workers. During each stage of steel processing, he made studies of all the different machines, materials, lights, and tools. When he took all of that, he crafted it in his studio into a narrative that expressed what he called the modern Cyclops. A drawing or painting not only contains the ability to express what you see like a camera, but also to inject your own story into it. Whether you do that through color or brushwork or the type of mark making, adding imaginative elements, or through a remarkable sense of subtlety that only a master can capture. The choice is infinite, and more importantly, the choice is yours. So realism is boring. Well, only if you confine yourself to a definition of realism that is, well, boring. Using a projection or a fancy set of calipers to transfer each measurement exactly to your reference is boring. Because you technically are using your eyeballs, I guess, so maybe you can call that seeing, but seeing is about looking deeper and understanding why what we do is important to us. If we're taking the time to learn and care about why patterns of lights and darks are happening instead of mindlessly just copying them, we're finding what makes that light meaningful. Searching for meaning and understanding, it never gets boring. It can lead you to so many places, like learning about how the physics of light works or studying the structure and anatomy of a head. All these new things that you've explored to learn more about drawing not only give you more skills to tackle drawing better portraits, but they give you the ability to see those patterns elsewhere and to choose whether or not to include them or to bend the rules into your own unique ideas. If you do things mindlessly, you might be able to imitate some of the same results closely. But you won't get to experience the process of understanding how the parts of something build into a greater cohesive whole. And you'll surely be limiting your creative growth in the long term, because what makes drawing fun is recognizing the fundamental skills and seeing yourself grow to express more through them. Now, that doesn't mean that everything representational is old news or replaced by a camera, because even with an academic drawing intended to be as accurate as possible, there is still an incredible amount to express. Take these drawings from the French Academy. Several people can draw the same subject, and they can all be equally accurate, but all express vastly different ideas, even with incredibly simple tools. There's so much information in life that you can choose to take the lighting of this and change the key. You can make it all low contrast and ethereal, or pack in tons of powerful darks and lights. You can focus on creating large simplistic forms that showcase the beauty and interlocking of anatomy that Greeks somehow mastered over 2,000 years ago. You can carve using your eraser to sculpt light outwards from the darkness. There are always unanswered questions waiting for you to find them. Even if you are just trying to faithfully copy what you see, it's impossible to capture everything. You're always selecting and omitting something, and that selection is the storytelling. Regardless if you want to tell some sort of grand story to the world or just make something small for yourself, it's not about the end goal, it's the process of making something that brings meaning to you. Drawing gives you a way to ask questions of the world and the tools to discover the answer. Drawing is the act of seeing, but not just for our literal idea of the world, it's a way of seeing the things that we'd never otherwise take the time to notice. That's why the sketches of Da Vinci are so powerful. He wasn't a man who was just trying to grind out some anatomy tutorials, that way he could learn to draw better anime girls. He was someone who was trying to earnestly look at the world and ask questions. The world is full of seemingly infinite chaos, and Da Vinci's work shows a man who is on a quest to make sense of all the random noise. The act of taking a moment to stop and observe the world seems like an idea that, as time goes on, we only get further away from. When you spend a few hours observing someone's face, noticing the large shapes and how they reduce into small, intricate forms, you're not just faithfully copying them. You're writing a love letter to them. When you're creating a piece of art to capture a feeling, whether that is a meaningful story to you or just the appreciation of a beautiful sight you had, you're taking the time to process those feelings and reflect on them into something greater. That picture might not turn out all that great. Or it might get 0 likes on social media, but the act of creating in itself is enough to bring meaning to you. And there's no better reason than that to pursue art. If you look at drawing as a fundamental tool that you have to investigate your ideas, then the search of learning new things becomes less centered around what techniques do I need and what materials do I need, and much more about chasing the ideas that interest you. Learning becomes simpler, more driven, and more contextualized. People ask me all the time, Jake, how do I beat art block? Well, I think the first question you need to answer is, why am I making art? You don't need some sort of concrete vision, but if you follow the thread of learning things that interest you and move towards art that you actually want to make, instead of knocking out a bunch of tasks that you were told that you were required to do first, then you won't feel so burned out on art. But if you're anything like me, I know that you can feel all of that and still ask the question of, yeah, that's cool and all, but how did the masters actually learn how to draw? Oftentimes, I find that people look at history and try to reverse engineer the mastery. They lead first with what techniques did they use or what materials did they use, instead of asking themselves what led to create this type of art. What happened in their life to create such a sense of purpose as to bring these visions to a tremendously powerful life? Because this is truly a monumental act of passion above all else. Now, there are plenty of people who have all the passion in the world but still aren't producing epic artworks. Earlier, I showed you some drawings from the French Academy of Fine Arts, which during the 19th century trained all the painters that I've been showing you. Artists who had training that looked like this, but all went wildly off into their own direction afterwards. So how did these guys actually learn how to draw? Well, it would be best if we heard from a man who's dedicated his life to studying the practices of the French academic art. Not only does he understand the history better than anyone else, but he actually has the skill to pull it off as well. Hi, Ramon. I was wondering if you could tell me how the masters trained to become such great artists, and also what was the role of drawing in that process?
Sure thing. So basically, in the context of French academic drawing, the most important thing was the ensemble, which means the overall thing. You're not going to focus too much on any of the parts, not on one foot, not on one arm, not on one little detail or whatever. You're thinking of all the elements in your drawing or in your painting or in your sculpture as these things that work together to tell a story. But the central idea is that you work on the parts only enough so they contribute to the larger overall thing. Drawing was, and always has been, the foundation for that in a lot of ways, because it's just really practical. It's an easier medium than painting is, because painting has all the difficulties of drawing and color and handling the materials and all that on top of it. And so drawing was convenient, it was less expensive, it was just like a little less intimidating for people to get started with. The general progression of the training was like this. People would draw from casts, which are just sculptures of Greek and Roman figures. Once you did a pretty good drawing of something like that, not perfect, but just reasonably good, you would be moved up to drawing from the live model. In the morning classes, which were the main classes that people studied at, you would have people drawing and people painting in there. And once you did probably a couple of, tolerably good drawings, that's a word they would use a lot, then they would move you on to like painting a foot or painting a head or whatever, and eventually to painting the entire figure. Now, again, they thought the drawing was tremendously important, so there were one additional drawing class in the evenings, and that one was strictly drawing. For that class, they would have mostly models, but occasionally they would have plaster casts as well, but those were capped at 12 hours. The tools for all this stuff were kept really simple. Teachers did not want you stuck on what tool to use, what pencil, what kind of whatever. You would sketch in charcoal, pretty much everybody would, for a large drawing, because it's easy to erase, it has a fairly large value range, it makes your job easier, basically. From there, you could use a stump, and that was for evening things out. You could also use it to apply tone, and most people would use a Conte crayon or some kind of black chalk to reinforce the drawing, to add accents, to make some things darker. But really, how you use those tools was kind of up to you. I mean, some of it was dictated by necessity. You're probably going to start with charcoal because it's just easier. You're probably going to finish with the Conte crayon because it does things that the charcoal can't. It goes darker, etc. But the point, more than anything else, was what Julian Alden Weir, who was a friend of Sargent's, and he was an American student at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris in the 1870s, what he said was the goal was to make intellectual progress. And what that means is that basically your teachers wanted you to understand what you were doing. You might keep a lot of the parts really simple. You're probably not doing hyper-realistic drawings with getting every fingernail and stuff like that on the model, because A, you didn't have time, and B, it doesn't add anything to the overall thing necessarily, right? Especially if it's a drawing of a full figure. And so what they cared about is that you captured the essence of the person, that you capture how they sit, that you capture how they stand, that you capture the weight on one leg or on the other leg, and that you really understand what makes this person different than literally any other person. Sure, you can know anatomy, but what makes this arm different than this other arm? What you learn by doing that is you learn to be thoughtful, and you learn that every single thing that you do has meaning. So you might not be doing a lot of details, you might not be putting in a lot of things, but the few things that you do put in, they matter. People, when they start, they might look at nature or a model or whatever and just see a lot of chaos, a lot of things. It's overwhelming. But what you learn through a process like this is how to have a story, tell the important parts of it, and let the rest kind of work itself out. In the end, again, it all comes back to the ensemble, the overall thing, whether it's an overall figure or whether it's an overall scene, an overall landscape, an overall still life, or whatever else the case might be. because it ends up being about the story that you're telling. What all of this combines into is, yes, you're getting training in how to draw the figure. Yes, you're getting training in how to put the figure in an environment, etc. But more importantly than that, you're learning how to make choices. You're learning how to tell stories. You're learning how to look at just the chaos of existence, like all the stuff that overwhelms you, all the things that are out there. And you're learning to slow down and say, okay, what do I want out of this? What matters here? And what do I filter out? Let's say that you don't want to paint big narrative scenes. Let's say you want to paint landscapes. The same logic applies, right? You're still gonna have way more stuff to do than you can actually do. You're still gonna have to make hard choices in terms of what matters. And ultimately, the making of those choices, the things that you choose to keep and the things that you choose to discard, that is what makes you different from other people. That is what makes the stories that you tell unique and, again, meaningful, whether they're meaningful just to you or they're meaningful to somebody else.
I think a lot of people online especially look at these master artists and they think that they just need to learn more and more and more and to, study an infinite amount of theory and practice, grinding the same things a million times. But it's nice to look at this stuff and see that there definitely was a totally different school of thought there.
Yeah, it's just a fear that people have. That fear of failure, that fear of risk. I mean, all of us have that, right? And we feel that we can mitigate it if I'm just ready enough, if I just know more, if I just study all the muscles. Obviously, some amount of that can be useful, but ultimately what you're doing is you are holding off on the moment where you have to take the risk and do something scary. Just because you know a bunch of stuff or you prepared a lot, you don't know what you're preparing for until you actually do it, right? And it's still gonna be scary and you're still gonna fall on your face and you're still gonna learn more from falling on your face than from over preparing. The more you trip up and the more that you mess things up and try again, you can prepare more intelligently next time, right? But there's no avoiding that risk. Making yourself take those risks trains you to get better at taking risks, which is, a separate skill that doesn't develop on its own. I think that the training was meant to empower you to reduce the friction or the time between you having an idea and you being able to communicate it to another person. And that's ultimately what this stuff is about.
That is, in essence, what academic work is. Drawing is the fundamental heart that beats life into all of your art. It's the foundation of your structure, and there's no sense in furnishing a house until you built the walls. We've honed in a bit on 19th century history, not because it's about returning to some sort of ambiguous renaissance of art, but because it's a time in history that holds many answers to questions that we most often face today. Everyone says something different about how to make art. Everything's so confusing. There's so many tools. Which program do I use? Which brush is best? What Ramon and the French Academy by proxy have just told us is to tune all of that out. Focus on what's most basic. Charcoal, figure drawings, no complex multi-step procedures or crazy tools, just hone your most basic skills. It's like going to the gym. Yes, you can go to get big muscles and show them off all the time, but really going to the gym is about keeping your body moving, feeling self-confident, avoiding pain in your everyday life, and keeping a healthy mind. Those benefits extend into every area of your life. Drawing gives you the ability to see, and those benefits pay dividends into all areas of your art. Whether you want to make some academic figurative work for the rest of your life, or you want to make completely abstract work, it all comes from you. And you're a human who lives a human experience and a human life. Being able to look deeply and ask questions and study the world that you come from will strengthen any aspect of your art. More importantly, it will give you a reason to connect yourself to art and to find meaning in what you do, which will always keep you motivated and growing. That's why we learn how to draw. Also, I know some of you are very much so like me and you want practical advice. How do I hold the pencil? Which pencil do I get? Me and Ramon have a website, halftonestudio.art. We have over 1,000 free references there, same casts and sculptures that the French academics used to draw that you saw in those pictures. I have a free 13-page guide there. We got a great blog where you can read about some art history and other great information that we just put up. And we have a full course if you want to check that out as well. So go check it out, halftonestudio.art. Thanks for watching.